it's about to get filthy up in this bitch, bruh. We getting lit, saying the most obnoxious shit. Okay, look, I changed up the camera vibes. Look. I might get vertigo the way everything is like flipped. But look, at least maybe you guys might be able to understand the language of my mind. You know, true transcendence, pure art is all I'm bringing you today. So get you a good hydration drink. We're having fun tonight, chat. It's Sunday afternoon at the beginning of the week. It's that time that you're genuinely, preparing for the week ahead. Getting the last few sips of freedom before the bullshit work starts tomorrow. But it's Monday, so you gotta come twice as hard because shit just be happening on a Monday, just to fuck with you. Your coworkers want to fuck with you because they haven't seen you in like 3 days. So they like, let me just cause all the stress in one day. But look, I hope you're blessed and you having a good day. I hope you having an even better day now that your boy's here. So hit the fucking follow button, hit the goddamn likes. Of course, hit the notifications if you know what the Mr. Muncher Academy is really about. We're over here gooning. Look, this is pure goonography, This is hoology for goons, I told y'all, bro, I was gonna bring y'all some heat. I was gonna bring y'all some beautiful IRL shit. And what did I bring? Friday, exploring in San Diego. Saturday, the best zoo in the fucking world. Yo, listen. If you enjoyed those two streams, hit the comment section and let me know. Because I'm not gonna lie, the Friday stream I was a little upset about because I saw that my internet was so dog shit throughout the whole stream. I need to get some kind of like signal booster to be able to upload the fucking stream. They're going into the damn abyss. I'm talking to absolutely nobody, bro. Half of the stream I'm just like, what is going on, bro? Shit is just like dropping. So at the end of the day, if you joined the streams live, you probably had a terrible experience because the shit just was so inconsistent. But go on Mr.Muncher.com or go to fucking YouTube and find those IRL shits, because I put a lot of effort walking for 3 hours, just back and neck pain constantly. I don't know what the hell is going on with my shoulder. I just slept crooked. I just slept tilted. And I'm over here with, stiff ass neck. Pause. Bro, of course, Thursday night I did. Bro, I literally landed and I went to a comedy show almost instantly. I'm fucking committed to this shit, bro. I need that stage time. I didn't get any shows on Friday and Saturday because I was like, bro, I'm gonna be streaming. I'm gonna be tired. Bro, after the fucking Friday stream, I got back to the hotel and I fucking knocked the fuck out, bro. I was so tired. I was trying to have a second leg to the stream where I'm in these streets. But I guess to be continued, bro. I enjoyed San Diego. This was my second time up there. So like, I'm not gonna lie to you. It was a vibe, bro. I see what that sunshine tax really is about. People genuinely love fucking San Diego and California, bro. I'm not gonna lie. When I was trying to get to that park, I met so many nice people fucking, pointing me over a bridge to just farm aura, bro. I farmed aura for the fucking 10 million time, but on a bridge, bro, with the fucking sunlight in the face. I'm gonna have to download that video and review it, because at the end of the day, bro, that wasn't even for nobody else but myself. That was me on that bridge just farming aura, bro. That was for me to look at and goon to later. It's not even for you. That's just for me, myself, and I to goon to later. But we're just playing around, bro. I hope y'all enjoyed the last stream. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. Cause look, bro, I've kind of upgraded the stream a little bit. I'm kind of trying to bring in a different, side of me, bring a little more creativity, to a little bit more interest and for your goldfish brains, to comprehend the dopamine level that I'm bringing. So I gotta, get motherfuckers where they're at. I gotta make TikTok content soon, bro. I have not really been able to get as much TikTok content as I wanted to do, but unfortunately, we'll get there. We'll get there. TikTok content is peak, because I feel like a lot of streamers get on TikTok and that's how they get a lot of their viewers, and the boy needs the views, I need those views, bro. But look, I've been trying, I've been grinding, I've been putting in the effort. I hope y'all see that across the past year streams, bro. It's been a lot of ups and downs. It's been a lot of fucking internet failure. It's been a lot of bullshit when it comes to streaming IRL. I don't know how the fuck Speed does it. I don't know how, all this big damn traveling streamers do it. When they're traveling and have no internet spikes, bro, half of my stream was down. Like, it's hilarious that half of my stream was down twice. I was gonna say that if I got a signal booster, that will be able to, make it a constant stream where the shit is just not going up and down and fucking crashing. Cause bro, the only way I'm able to save some of these videos is by getting them from YouTube. And if YouTube is not getting the fucking connection, it's not gonna save on my phone. I don't have enough fucking storage on my phone to have that. So I really, need to upgrade my IRL shit. So I met a couple at the zoo that was, telling me how to upgrade my shit. And bro, they were so nice and so helpful. I really appreciated it, bro. And it's good content when you're like, able to talk to people, because some people get nervous, when you have a camera. Because I saw a lot of people were like moving weird, like whenever I had the camera. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little awkward too. I was a little shy, because bro, I'm not gonna lie, IRL shit is more than just talking to a camera, bro. People are staring at you, or they're like looking at you like, who the fuck is this guy, so it kind of makes it a little awkward to talk to people or just conversate, because I'm like I don't want to get your face in it, because if you don't want to be, I'm just holding a camera and maybe you might not want to be in the camera. So I just I was very mindful. I did get a lot of fucking aura shots at the zoo with the birds. I was like, bro, the birds were zipping fucking by. They were running past the camera, just aura farming, bro. They were clip farming. The birds were clip farming, bro. I was like, what the fuck? They're like zooming past the camera at fucking Mach 5 speed, like just absolutely giving me a concussion while they're like speeding 5. Bro, you could probably hear that in the audio of the stream, like, but I gotta get a little bit better at streaming IRL, because I might have to start doing that a little bit more often in Dallas, because I like it, especially when I travel, bro. I think all my cities that I'm gonna be traveling, bro, I might have to start doing IRL shit, because like I told you, bro, this is the Diary of an Open Mic Comic, and this is like the best. They're going fast. This is the best like way I can keep track of my comedy journey. I can look back at when I dropped this, or like that week, in like a summary of the week. Cause I don't know, bro, I enjoy like a little diary like this. Cause bro, you see a lot of comedians, you see a lot of people that blow up in the, public eye, but they don't have like that history. Well, Joji, I always bring him up because he did Filthy Frank. He was on YouTube for years before he became like a music like icon, So I think I like that, like when people can, you know, see the artist in his infancy, in his like early stages of putting shit together. And then, you know, Matt and Shade's Secret Podcast, before Shane become a juggernaut in comedy, he had like, you know, his old podcast from like years ago where he's just yapping with the boy Matt, you know? They're just, you know, just good old buddies talking about the comedy scene. And I could do the same thing because, bro, like the comedy scene has so much drama in it and so much bullshit that I could yap about it forever and ever, right? So it just kind of makes me a little interested in streaming because, like, bro, you're just kind of talking, and once in a while you might have a chatter that might stay like 3 hours of the stream. So it's like companionship. I need a friend. So, you know, honestly, I start enjoying streams like that, but my fucking streams that I'm using through the app to do IRL shit, I use Prism, right? But the problem with that is I don't really know how to edit and you know, help produce the stream any better, you know? So I'm trying to learn that app a little bit more because my Kick stream kept going down every time the internet went out, so it would just re-upload and drop the stream. Whereas, you know, my Twitch stream stayed on. YouTube was the best. You know, I like the YouTube. Oh no! My fucking keyboard. But I don't know, chat. Y'all let me know in the comments if you're watching the stream after the fact, you know, because I'm gonna look at a few things on the interwebs, what they got going on the interwebs, because y'all know me, bro. The reaction content is where it's at. The reaction content is where it's at. You gotta get these reaction clips. Oh, time periods you never survive in. I need to see this. By Grunge. It's 50 minutes? Okay, is my internet just down? What's going on here? Hello?
You only think you'd want a time machine. If a modern-day person actually ended up in these time periods, it wouldn't take long before they'd be begging for a ride back home.
I'm not gonna lie, I do not like this audio.
If you believe what Hollywood tells you, then life during the Middle Ages might seem romantic and glamorous. Sadly, the truth is that life in the Middle Ages was about as grim as it gets, and death lurked around pretty much every corner. Grief is awful no matter what form it takes, but the passing of a child can be an unspeakably tragic turn of events. Luckily, we in the West are far less likely to experience this. In America, infant mortality is only around 0.006%, and that rate drops once kids leave infancy. Mortality for children between the ages of 1 and 4 is around 0.0002%, and for kids aged 5 to 14, it's around 0.0001%. Now compare that to childhood mortality in the Middle Ages. According to Representing Childhood, exact figures are impossible to come by, but estimates place the medieval infant mortality at around 25%. That means 1 out of every 4 babies born during that time period wouldn't make it past their first year of life. The odds went up a bit for children who made it to toddlerhood. Kids between the ages of 1 and 4 had a mortality rate of around 12.5%. If they made it to 5, then things looked better, as the mortality rate for kids between the ages of 5 and 9 was only about 6%. Still, that was far worse than even the highest mortality rate for infants in modern America. The sad truth is that being born in the Middle Ages didn't guarantee you a life, not by a long shot. Luckily for us, bubonic plague isn't such a problem nowadays. It does still exist. In fact, 20,000...
Did somebody in California get diagnosed with literally the plague? The plague? So, Yeah, I hope we don't get that shit back.
People came down with it between 2000 and 2009, including 56 in the United States, but it certainly doesn't exist on the scale that it did in the Middle Ages. In fact, were you to travel back in time to 1340s Europe, when the outbreak known as the Black Death was ongoing, your chances of survival would be somewhere between 7 in 10 and 2 in 5.
2 in 5? 2 and 5, bro. This would be like lockdowns. My views will go crazy. If you get an ultimate lockdown like this where people are scared to be outside, we would get the ultimate view count, bro. I'm gonna get view count of doom, bro. Just be so famous.
What? Nothing. Here's your
But then again, half of them will drop off by like the 3-month mark because it would run through the whole town. Everybody would be dead.
I'm not dead.
Yeah, he says he's not dead.
Yes, he is. I'm not.
He isn't?
Estimates suggest that the Black Death killed as much as 60% of the entire population of Europe. Meaning that
60% of the population? Imagine, bruh. Half your you getting a squad wipe, bro. Imagine all your homies get wiped. You getting squad wiped in this hoe, bruh. Squad
3
wipe.
out of every 5 people you met were going to be dead by the end of the pandemic, which peaked over the course of just 4 years. But the craziest part of all this is what happened after the outbreak died down. Since around half the known world had died off, the balance of power in Europe underwent a radical shift. Suddenly, peasants could ask for pay raises and demand improvements in working conditions, and in many ways,
Bro, if you're a peasant, but why not just go up the hierarchy and just steal all the gold that like a lot of the rich people probably died from? Like, couldn't you just steal the gold and not be a peasant anymore?
actually got
They don't have that higher level thinking, bro.
better for them, and all it took was the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. Everyone in medieval Europe was a good Catholic, except for those who weren't, and they either had to make pretend or die for their beliefs. And that's because the religious freedoms enjoyed today were most definitely not a thing. During the 11th and 12th centuries, for example, people started thinking critically about the Catholic Church, and one of the things that some of those people disliked most about the Church was its vast wealth and power. Unfortunately, these were dangerous times, and the Church was so wealthy and powerful that it could snuff out pretty much anyone who criticized it. In the name of God, obviously. No one is really sure how many people were burned during that time period, but what is known is that it was sometimes done in groups of 200 or more, and this didn't end for a long time either. Queen Mary of England burned 300 Protestants over the course of the 1550s. Women had it.
300. The 1550s. So are we talking about like the whole 50s? So like 10 years till the 60s, or are we talking like 1 year? 300 in 1 year is a crazy number, but 300 over 10 years. I mean, that's like, you know, cost of doing business, low key.
Especially hard during the Middle Ages, they were generally regarded as morally weak and weren't allowed to do things that modern women take for granted, such as getting a job, deciding who to marry, or generally having opinions about things. There were some powerful women,
and they say the patriarchy is still alive. Wrong.
But they were pretty uncommon. The worst part about being a woman, though, was that you were expected to procreate or else become a nun. And you wouldn't have been too mad to have taken that second option, considering the intense dangers of childbirth, which would kill like 1 out of every 3 women. In comparison, today's
I'm not gonna lie, bro. I'm not gonna lie. Everybody died in childbirth back in the day, bro. The way motherfuckers make it seem like if you survived, like, that's crazy. Like, everybody used to die in childbirth back in the day.
Mortality rate is 1 out of every 5,814. In fact, childbirth in the Middle Ages and the Tudor period was so dangerous that women were encouraged to write out a last will and testament well in advance of giving birth, which kind of puts a damper on the whole thing. Popular culture based around the medieval period tends to focus around the higher echelons of society, kings, queens, nobles, and other aristocrats, for example. But those people only made up a small fraction of society. Peasants, on the other hand, comprised around 90% of the population, meaning the chances were good you'd be slinging mud with the rest of them.
Oh, what a giveaway. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, eh? That's what
The problem with
yeah, bro, back in the day, there was no such thing as the middle class, if we're being real.
A peasant, unfortunately, is that the life of a peasant pretty much sucked. Peasants wore the same rough, itchy wool outfit every day, ate bread, porridge, and vegetables, and if they were lucky, got a little bit of meat every now and again. On top of that, whenever the weather sucked, they died. Peasants would starve when the weather was too wet, and they would starve when the weather was too dry, because when the crops failed, so did they. The average life expectancy for a peasant in medieval Europe was between 25 and 30 years old. If you wanted
bro, if you die before your 20s and your 30s, bro, you basically a medieval peasant. That's crazy.
Travel in the Middle Ages, the local monastery usually offered a clean, safe place to sleep. But what if there was no local monastery? Well, in that case, you might be able to stop at an inn. Conditions in most inns weren't exactly perfect, but they were usually a safe enough place to spend the night.
I'm not gonna lie, bro. I like going to like a local hotel or motel like in that city. Like Hilton's, too bougie for me. Sometimes you gotta go to like the Red Roof, sometimes you gotta go to the Motel 6 to really get to enjoy the city,
Going, however, you weren't always going to have the option of staying in an inn, and that might mean sleeping out in the open, which was a really, really terrible idea. There were always unsavory characters lurking on the roads after dark, and wild animals were a serious problem too. People embarking on pilgrimages during the Middle Ages.
Yeah, bro, imagine you with your homies, damn, bro. Yeah, Jimmy got ate up by a wolf yesterday, bro. He tried to go camping for real.
Often traveled in groups for safety, and wealthy people would sometimes just pay someone to go on pilgrimage for them. That may seem kinda like it defeats the point, sure, but it's gotta be better than risking it out on the road.
But that's the thing, that's where the lore is built. If you're, on a pilgrimage, that's where the lore is built for real. You have to build your lore on a pilgrimage for real.
These wars have been fought for pretty silly reasons, and the Middle Ages were no different. Many of them, of course, were fought to decide which aristocrat or royal was going to end up sitting on the throne. But even though these were faraway disputes contested between people you'd probably never even seen before, you'd still be the one dying for them. It wasn't all bad, though. In many cases, if you weren't killed within the first 40 days, you could go back home to your family. That's because it was bad business to draft all the peasants into service at the same time. With no one around to take care of the farms, the kingdom would lose money, and then it wouldn't be able to afford the war in the first place. Noblemen died in war too, of course. Before 1550, roughly 30% of them could expect to perish in some battle or another. But as for the peasants, well, no one really knows, because peasant deaths were considered so inconsequential that no one ever actually counted them. It didn't help that defeat in battle often meant the systematic slaughter of the losing side, which would have been mostly made up of commoners. Not a good time to be a peasant or a soldier, that's for sure, and most of the time being one meant being the other. In the UK today, there are no capital crimes at all because they abolished the death penalty back in 1965. But long before that, medieval England was really big on executing people. During the Middle Ages, there were 50 capital crimes on the books, which included not just treason and various forms of murder, but lesser things like poaching, robbery, and forgery. Weirdly, however, this is one of those rare instances where you'd actually be better off in the Middle Ages than you would be a little later on in history. Sure, there are no capital crimes in the UK today, but by the 1600s, the number of crimes you could be officially executed for rose to around 200, and included things like petty theft, damaging Westminster Bridge, and cutting down a sapling. Although it's worth pointing out that the so-called
cutting down a sapling, bro. Imagine you trying to get that loud pack, and you just get fucking murked for a loud pack. I mean, I guess that's what they got nowadays too. You got the wrong person's loud pack, you might get murked.
Of that time period actually resulted in fewer executions, probably because juries were reluctant to sentence people to death for such minor offenses. Still, you wouldn't want to risk it, would you? Most medieval people may have been illiterate, but that doesn't mean they were stupid. Everything you've heard about how people in the Middle Ages covered the taste of rotten meat with heavy spices isn't actually true. Spices were expensive, and anyone who could afford them could also afford to throw out any meat that had gone bad. In fact, for the most part, people knew how to preserve food. They salted, smoked, dried, and pickled it, and there doesn't seem to have ever been a rash of people dying because they were eating bad meat. There were other dangers lurking in the food, though. If you were rich, you probably owned a nice set of fancy glazed dishes which were full of lead and other heavy metals like mercury. But when you filled your plates and bowls up with salty or acidic foods, the glaze would start to break down and those metals would leach into your food. So members of the upper class were slowly poisoning themselves as they dined on their luxury dishware. Getting sick during the Middle Ages was even more of a nightmare than it is today. There were no antibiotics, no chemotherapy, and physicians didn't wash their hands in between patients. The things doctors did know were mostly wrong and almost always totally useless from a medical perspective.
Yeah, he got a cough. Let's chop off his arms. He's got pneumonia. He doesn't need his feet.
A sick person could be diagnosed with the help of an astrological chart, for example, and treatment might include bloodletting, purging, or trepanning, which was the practice of drilling a hole in the skull to relieve pressure in the brain. Unsurprisingly, these treatments not only rarely worked, but sometimes even hastened a patient's death. Still, the practice of bloodletting persisted for a long time. In fact, there's still debate on whether George Washington was killed by strep throat or by the aggressive bloodletting doctors used to treat the condition. If you somehow managed to escape all those other dangers, you'd still be left with one very harsh truth. The medieval period was very, very violent. In fact, according to History Extra, murder in medieval England was around 10 times more common than it is today. And there's a reason the men had it.
Motherfuckers was just murking each other left and right for no reason. They just straight murking each other, bruh. They were like, nah, we do not want no peace over here. It's straight beef, bruh. They wanted straight beef, bro.
Much worse than the women. Life expectancy for women in the Middle Ages was actually considerably better than it was for men, despite the fact that they frequently ran the risk of dying in childbirth. On average, a woman could expect to live about 9.4 years longer than her male counterparts, and that was mostly because of the constant violence that existed between men. Roughly 46% of all deaths in men ages 15 and above were caused by violence, so a man living in medieval England had a roughly 1 in 2 chance of meeting a bloody end. All in all, those really aren't great odds.
1 in 2? Are you serious? Bro, 1 in 2 chance?
Crusades were a pretty violent time for Europe and the Middle East.
Tragically, though, the violence isn't the only thing that would kill you if you lived during that era.
Let's say you embark on the First Crusade in 1096. The Pope has promised that if you die in combat, all your sins will be forgiven and you'll go to heaven. If you're a knight, that's very convenient because you also fight in non-holy wars, which are considered sinful. Plus, if you don't fight, you'll be branded a coward.
If you're a peasant, you're worried about going to hell not for who you
Damn, bro, people were clout chasing even back in the day, bro. Everybody just be clout chasing at all times.
fight, but for what you eat.
According to National Geographic, famine ravaged France before the Crusades, killing thousands of peasants. Many of those peasants resorted to cannibalism as they embarked on an unorganized crusade that was easily defeated by Turkish.
I'm not gonna lie, bro. You might die on a crusade, but it seems like the adventure of a lifetime, though, bro. Going on a crusade adventure just seems so much fun. Are you gonna die? More than likely. Will you come back? Never. But it just seems like an adventure of a lifetime. It's like Skyrim in real life, bro. You going on full on Skyrim adventure.
Forces. A second, more successful group of crusaders also struggled with hunger. As the Telegraph explained, 4,500 knights were joined by 35,000 people fleeing famine and poverty without weapons or even shoes. It would take 3 years to reach Jerusalem, and if you didn't die on the way...
You ain't got no shoes, bruh. That's the worst type of fucking pilgrimage or going to war. Bro, if you don't got no shoes and you gotta fight, bruh. No wonder people just were angry all the time, bruh.
You still had to scrounge for food. According to eyewitness accounts, Crusader cannibalism was so rampant that they were seen placing body parts on spits out in the open. Summer in the Holy Land was hell during the Crusades. According to the World of the Crusades, a daily life encyclopedia, the normal heat of the season was made worse by the medieval warm period that scorched the area from about 950 to 1250. That time span covers the 1st through 6th Crusades and part of the 7th. Along with the heat wave came lethal thirst that killed many crusaders along the way. And even if you could manage to find water, your enemies might take it before you could. Perhaps the best example of weaponized dehydration occurred in 1187, when the Sultan Saladin defeated King Guy in the Battle of Hattin. Saladin lured Guy's army away from a water source that gave the king a distinct advantage. The Crusaders withered in the sun, and Saladin's troops cranked up the heat. Guy's incredibly thirsty men couldn't fight back effectively. Saladin went on to retake Jerusalem from Christian control. setting the stage
They were
for the
playing
Third
tactically
Crusade.
back in the day, bro.
Stifling heat turned the Holy Land into a dry, blistering hellscape in the summer for much of the Crusades. However, winter was often just as bad.
Men and women alike died from exposure to snow, ice, days of heavy rain, vicious wind, and lethal hail.
Because of the mountainous terrain, torrents of water would wash away men and animals. When Richard the
Bro,
Lionheart...
it's like Earth is just like, I'm just gonna kill you any chance possible. Earth did not want these motherfuckers on Earth.
Army traveled to Ascalon during the Third Crusade, they braved downpours, hailstorms, and floods. All that water ruined food rations, and Crusaders sank into soaked ground. If you traveled by sea, you might avoid the mud, but the Mediterranean Sea was just as dangerous. Crusaders traveling by boat risked sinking in a massive storm or having their ship smashed against rocks. If you managed to get to the Crusades without dying along the way, and you didn't die in battle, then the doctor tending to your wounds might kill you. After all, the Crusades took place during the Middle Ages, when medicine was still very crude. This was a time when infant mortality was sky.
Ain't nobody trying to let you live, bro. They all want you dead. Your doctor gonna kill you. The fucking environment's gonna kill you. Everybody's trying to murk you. It's getting real oppy outside, bro. It's getting real oppy outside.
High. Mothers consistently died during childbirth, and doctors treated mental illness through barbaric methods. Battlefield medicine was especially rough. According to NBC News, a doctor at a Crusader hospital once amputated a fighter's leg because of a small infected wound. That patient died. Doctors had it rough too. A paper published by the National Center for Biotechnology Information recounted how one crusading nobleman wouldn't let doctors make potions for fear that he'd be poisoned. This kind of fear led to doctors being executed for simply trying to practice medicine. The word scurvy often evokes images of seafaring pirates turning into scurvy knaves, but severe vitamin C deficiency could also affect crusaders. Vitamin C is easy to get for us, thanks to all the citrus we have in easy reach. Medieval people living through the Crusades didn't have that luxury. As author Andrew Holt explained, Crusaders were largely meat eaters, in part because medieval knights thought of meat as something that made them strong. So how bad did scurvy get? It killed 1/6 of the French army during the Fifth Crusade. According to the book Plagues in Boxes, Crusaders laying siege to the Egyptian port of Damietta in 1218 suffered everything from severe pain in their feet to swollen gums to loose teeth and blackened shins. One of the defining diseases of the Crusades was dysentery.
A lot of people just killed the chef being like, he's poisoning us. They don't know what disease is. He's poisoning us. Mark him. They fucking killed like 30 fucking chefs being like, it's him, but it's the meat. Pause.
Is basically parasite-induced super diarrhea. That illness killed King John and countless soldiers across history's wars. Crusaders may have contracted dysentery by drinking water tainted with human waste. Perhaps the most famous case of the disease happened in the Seventh Crusade, when dysentery devastated much of Louis IX's army and afflicted Louis himself. In the spring of 1138, the Syrian city of Aleppo faced a siege. In the fall, after that siege was abandoned, it faced something far worse. In October of that year, a massive earthquake reduced parts of the city to rubble. According to Britannica.com, the quake leveled the citadel, killing hundreds. It also wrecked surrounding towns, destroying a Crusader fortress and a Muslim fort. An estimated 230,000 people died in the disaster. Earthquakes were a bigger problem during the time of the Crusades than you might think. In addition to dealing with dehydration, starvation, sickness, or arrows to the spleen, you also had to worry about the ground shaking beneath your feet. According to the book Medicine in the Crusades, more than a dozen earthquakes may have occurred in the era of the Frankish Crusader states, which were situated along the Dead Sea Fault system. Another powerful quake rocked Antioch in 1115, collapsing walls and scaring people so much that some of them jumped off buildings. During medieval times, crimes usually had cruel punishments. Depending on what crimes you committed, you could be boiled, stoned, impaled, beheaded, roasted, or killed in some other awful way.
A Gizmodo
Boiled? What type of freak shit is this? Boiled is crazy work.
Article pointed out that protections for accused criminals basically didn't exist, and using brutal torture to force confessions was encouraged.
Unfortunately for everyone living back then, the Crusades made all of this worse. According to the Encyclopedia of Violence, Peace, and Conflict, Christians associated homosexuality with Islam, and homosexuals could be burned at the stake in the time of the Crusades. The Crusades also fostered animosity toward Jews, heretics, lepers, the poor, and moneylenders. In 1275, King Edward I of England established the Statute of Jewry, which plunged Jews into poverty. In 1290, Edward exiled 3,000 Jews, some of which died after a ship's captain left them to drown on a sandbank. Even if you're not a Christian,
He was an OG Nazi. It's crazy. OG Nazi.
you might assume that being one would generally align you with the Crusaders. The truth is that all depends on what brand of Christianity you believe. After all, the Crusades took place before the Protestant Reformation paved the way for non-Catholic Christians to thrive. Depending on what stage of the Crusades you lived in, deviating from the Catholic Church's teachings might have gotten you killed. According to Britannica.com, the 12th century saw a large expansion in what Crusaders aimed to achieve.
Instead of focusing only on the Holy Land, they also set their sights on souls in Europe.
Christians who didn't strictly adhere to Roman Catholicism were considered a threat that was possibly more dangerous than Muslims, because they represented a threat from within.
In France, tensions over religion culminated in the Albigensian Crusade, which saw the Catholic faction of the north declare war on the Cathari in the south.
Bro, that should be so scary, bro. Fighting in a sword fight is so scary, bro. Getting in a gunfight is crazy enough, but sword fight, oh my god.
Cathari had unorthodox beliefs, so Crusaders slaughtered them by the thousands and burned them on giant pyres.
Catholics living in southern France became collateral damage in this slaughter.
The Albigensian Crusade also laid the groundwork for the Spanish Inquisition that would come later.
Expect a kind of Spanish Inquisition? Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
If you were Jewish during the Crusades, many Christian warriors considered you just as much an enemy as the Muslims they planned to fight. The
Why
Jewish
did
Virtual
Muslims and Jews
Library
always get
explained
lit
that
up, bro?
Christians viewed Jews as murderers of Christ, and some used the Crusades as an opportunity to get revenge. This was especially true of the First and Third Crusades. And during the People's Crusade of 1096, a band of peasants led by a monk named Peter the Hermit murdered hundreds of Jews. Meanwhile, Muslims clashed with both Christians and other Muslims. If you happened to be a member of the Ismaili Muslim minority, you were liable to get massacred by the ruling Sunni establishment. The strife between factions also bled into the Crusades. After the Muslim ruler of Damascus massacred 6,000 Ismailis, the Ismaili leader in Syria surrendered a city to Crusader King Baldwin II in return for protection. If you're going to live during the Crusades, it's probably best to be an iconic king or a legendary warrior.
This was the era of King Richard I, Saladin, the Knights Templar, and the Ismaili assassins who inspired the Assassin's Creed games, after all.
Perhaps being legendary would even help you survive, sort of like the main character in a movie. Well, King Baldwin IV was also legendary, but he had leprosy and died before the age of 25. Many of the other legends didn't do so well either. Richard the Lionheart of the Third Crusade faced deadly storms and the even deadlier Saladin.
I am not those men. I am Salah ad-Din.
King Richard died warring with his former co-crusader, King Philip II. While overseeing a siege, Richard caught a crossbow bolt to the arm and died from a wound infection. Meanwhile, Saladin, the Great Sultan, brilliant architect of the Battle of Hattin and conqueror of Jerusalem, likely died of typhoid fever. The stealthy Nizari Ismailis changed history by assassinating Conrad of Montferrat before he could be crowned King of Jerusalem. But they were destroyed by the Mongols in the 1250s. And the Knights Templar? They were skilled bankers and ferocious fighters, but after losing the last Crusader stronghold in 1291, they also lost favor with King Philip IV, who owed them money. Philip tortured Templars and burned dozens of them at the stake for made-up crimes. War is always hell, even when a pope proposes it. It is also the most obvious thing that could kill you during the Crusades. What might not be obvious is just how violent warfare could be. When Crusader forces...
Y'all couldn't tell? It's violent? What? War is the most violent. What?
Finally captured Jerusalem in 1099, they massacred just about everyone inside. According to the New York Times, men, women, and children were killed. There was apparently so much blood flowing in the streets that it was ankle deep. Jews who defended the city...
Blood that is ankle deep? Why are these motherfuckers beefing so much? Why are they so angry?
Alongside their Muslim neighbors, were locked in their synagogue, which was set on fire. And if you happen to live in the Byzantine capital of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade, there's a good chance you'd be slaughtered, not by Muslims, but by the Crusaders who were supposed to be your allies. According to the Ancient History Encyclopedia, deep distrust and religious tensions between Holy Roman and Byzantine empires led Crusaders to sack Constantinople, looting and murdering as they went. The bloodshed was so intense that it was said the blood flowed through the streets of the city like a river for days.
With holy wars like that, you wouldn't need an...
For days? Days, not hours, not weeks, like days?
actual hell to punish you for your sins.
You'd already be living in hell, and probably dying in it. Compared to other ancient civilizations, life was simpler back in Greece, right? Wrong. While we'd like to imagine it as a cultured and sophisticated society, there's absolutely no way you'd survive life in ancient Greece for long. Here's why. Feeling unwell? Prior to the 5th...
I'm barely surviving now. I'm not surviving in ancient Greece. The fuck?
century BCE, the human body was basically left to the mercy of the gods.
I'm over here. If I can't have goldfish, I'm like, fuck.
Patients often participated in a healing ritual called temple sleep or incubation. It's exactly what it sounds like. Patients would literally just go to sleep in a temple, and then in the morning, they'd tell a priest about their dreams from the night before. Based on that dream, the priest would then prescribe a remedy, usually in the form of an incantation or a charm of some sort, or they'd simply declare the patient healed. There were technically doctors back then, but there weren't any specific
Chiropractors be like.
For people who advertised themselves as such. And as for surgery, these were the kinds of tools that were used, the stuff of nightmares.
This is going to be extremely painful, Mr. Verrill.
What porno did they get that from? What the fuck?
Meanwhile, anyone who happened to live in Athens in 430 BC had a roughly 25% chance of dying in a horrible way. That's because a mysterious plague broke out that lasted for about 5 years, and the death toll was catastrophic. The plague ended up killing somewhere between 75,000 to 100,000 people.
What the fuck? Bro, everything's just trying to murk you all through the ancient history. What the fuck?
Aspects of the human body were a complete mystery in ancient Greece. People firmly believed that if a woman was ill, it was likely because she'd fallen victim to a wayward womb. You heard that right. This ancient piece of pseudoscience even had a name, the wandering womb. Some physicians believed the womb was an entirely separate entity that just so happened to live inside women. According to Wired, it was widely believed that these freewheeling wombs would be coaxed back into place by applying pleasant smells to a woman's you-know-what. Meanwhile, highly unpleasant smells were applied to whatever part of the body the womb had theoretically wandered off to. Oh, and there was another treatment prescribed for keeping a womb in place: pregnancy. And in the ancient world, pregnancy and delivery were exceptionally dangerous. According to women in antiquity, a pregnancy was prescribed for everything from fever and insomnia to chronic back pain. Jeez. Sparta is widely considered to be the most militaristic of the Greek city-states. At the height of its power, around 404 BC, the city of Sparta didn't even have walls. Inhabitants evidently felt that they didn't need them because they had Spartans. When it comes to Sparta, figuring out what's real and what's fiction can be tough. We know the land in Sparta was very fertile.
Now we got ice agents.
And not having to worry about food meant that people could focus on other hobbies, like poetry and bloody battle.
This is Sparta!
Sparta's militaristic bent began when it managed to conquer the neighboring land of Messenia, turning its inhabitants into slaves. Boys were trained from the age of 7 to 20, and they were basically expected to be resistant to hunger and cold, despite having given precious little in the way of food, clothing, or supplies. If they were suspected of having any kind of disability, the Spartans would kill them, usually when they were infants. According to National Geographic, the only time these slaves got a break from training was when they were actually at war. According to the BBC, the ancient Greeks took a minimalist approach to makeup. They didn't want the cosmetics to appear obvious. They just wanted their skin to look healthy. Unfortunately, these cosmetics were made from lead and mercury. In fact, such powders were used well into the 19th century. According to University College London, that's when women started using much more of the stuff and the damaging effects became quite apparent. Blackened skin.
Bro, look at her neck and look at her face. Oh my god. Bro, it's creepy. Bro, she fucking deep fried her skin, bro. She deep fried her skin.
Baldness, even damaged teeth. According to NBC News, both men
She's doing white face
and women in ancient Greece took to wearing lead face cream, which was believed to help keep their complexions clear and even improve the condition of their skin. It did neither, of course. Around 1177 BC, several civilizations fell, including the Babylonians, the Egyptians, and the early Greek civilizations like the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. Cities were sacked and burned, trade routes abandoned. In a letter, Babylonian king Hammurabi described the scenario like this: "Behold, the enemy's ships came, my cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country." No one's really sure who these enemies were, but they do know a great many people met a grisly end at the hands of a group of raiders known only as the Sea Peoples. Egyptian records tell tall tales.
Aliens? Aliens? The aliens were there and back in the day. Wow.
Of a mysterious people who laid waste to the entire area. It seems as though they first showed up alongside the Hittites. Strangely, no one recorded who they were or exactly where they came from. They fought in Egypt and the Mediterranean for centuries, destroying entire cities and settlements and then moving on. And then these mysterious pirates fell out of Egyptian history in 1178 BC. Would you have survived their warships and ceaseless rampages? We're guessing the answer is no. According to punishment in ancient Athens, people were often punished by society out of sheer anger. Anyone could bring charges against anyone else. About 96% of surviving court documents feature cases in which one person simply hated the other. By the time both parties were in court, it was the prosecutor's job to make the jury feel equally angry so that punishment could be handed out and supposed justice served. Suffice it to say, the laws of ancient Greece could be incredibly brutal. In the 7th century BC, Athens asked an aristocrat named Draco to draft a new set of laws. This
Draco
fellow is why we use the word draconian to describe particularly brutal laws. He was, in short, a complete and utter jerk. As Encyclopedia Britannica explains it, draconian laws were said to be written in blood rather than ink. Death was prescribed for almost all criminal offenses. Think you would have survived these harsh laws? You likely would have been sentenced to death for such arrogance.
A volcanic eruption that blocked out the sun, a rampage that wiped out half a kingdom, a plague that killed 50 million people. You think life today is tough? Think again.
Bring out your dead! Bring out your dead!
The term bubonic plague is likely to conjure up images of plague doctors wandering the streets of 17th century Europe, but those later outbreaks were
looks like fucking damn pigeons. What the hell?
Actually linked to the one that kicked off in the 6th century. It was known as the Plague of Justinian, after Justinian I, who was the Byzantine emperor when death and disease came to Constantinople in 542. Entire generations were born and died in a world tainted by this pandemic, which didn't end until almost 200 years later in 750 AD. The plague spread so quickly thanks to a perfect storm of conditions, including a cold spell that made food scarce and forced people to travel elsewhere for work. Trade boomed as a result.
Dying in the cold would be so painful. Dying in the cold would be so painful. You love 2025? Yeah, bro. It's a lot better than fucking living like this. Dying in the cold.
And plague-infested fleas hitched rides on rats that, in turn, hitched their rides on the boats and carts of trade caravans. By the time the plague had disappeared, it had devastated the population of the known world. The death toll is uncertain, but it's estimated that between 30 and 50 million people lost their lives. The symptoms of the plague of Justinian will be familiar to anyone who knows about the Black Death, and there's a good reason for that. In 2014, a team of researchers discovered that the strains of bacteria that caused these outbreaks weren't just equally deadly, but genetically related too.
What have the Romans ever done for us? Brought peace? Oh, peace! Shut up!
There's a saying that Rome wasn't built in a day, and it didn't fall in a day either. As the once mighty empire began to crumble, people who had lived under the protection of Rome for centuries were suddenly left to figure things out for themselves. By 410,
it's like the Soviet Union ending, bro. That's like people talking about the Soviet Union ending, bro.
Empire was in dire straits thanks to a combination of internal strife and attacks from outside forces, such as the Goths, Saxons, and Picts. Even when the empire's citizens were able to oust pretenders and would-be emperors, their appeals to Rome for help against these advancing tribes went unanswered. Take Britain, for example. The Romans initially hired a force of Saxon mercenaries from the European continent to defend the empire against the advancing Picts. Before long, however, these same mercenaries had decided that they too liked the look of Britain.
Damn,
what happened
bro,
next
they
is a matter of some
on the
contention among
homie.
historians.
That's the thing, bro. You can't be putting nobody on, bro. They flipped on the homie. Bro, I imagine you just hired your boy and he's like, nah, fuck you. Like, damn, bro.
While certain literary sources suggest that the Germanic tribes essentially wiped out the British natives, the archaeological record is less certain when it comes to the amount of bloodshed that took place. Still, while the destruction may not have been epic in scale, there was almost certainly some tension between the natives and the incoming Saxons. And of course, you still had to worry about those barbarian hordes knocking at the gates. William the Conqueror's invasion of Britain came at the very end of the Dark Ages, and it turned out to be a pretty terrible way to wrap up a terrible few centuries. At the time, William held the title of Duke of Normandy, and he believed that the Anglo-Saxon king Edward the Confessor had promised to name him as heir to England. When Edward died in 1066, however, his brother-in-law, Harold Godwinson, took the throne instead. This sequence of events swiftly led to the Norman invasion of England, in which Harold was killed at the Battle of Hastings and William subsequently declared king. Unfortunately for England's population, William didn't seem too concerned with the lives of those he had conquered, especially when they put up resistance.
Bro, imagine fighting in a battle like this, bro. I would have to lay dead. I would have to play dead, bro. Fighting like this, bro, you get, bro, the amount of PTSD you're gonna have. Bruh.
The northern regions of England continued to fight back against William's new regime, so William led a new campaign, known to historians as the Harrying of the North. William decided to basically destroy the entirety of the north of England, and he did so with such efficiency that famine and cannibalism soon became commonplace. One historian, Simeon of Durham, wrote that before long there was simply no one left in most of the region's small villages. It would be 9 years before people started moving back, and the Doomsday Book of 1086 described about 1/3 of the north as an uninhabitable wasteland. During the Dark and Middle Ages, every bite of...
It will be kind of nice to live out in a remote area like that, but still have internet. I know I'm talking about a fictional world. Imagine you live in the middle of nowhere, but you have solid internet. That would be a vibe. You don't have to worry about money. You can just live there remotely.
Bread could be deadly. For centuries, Europe had been the site
But
of a
I feel like
devastating
you go
plague
crazy after like 30 days, though. You go crazy after 30 days.
That became known as St. Anthony's Fire. It was named for the monks of St. Anthony of Egypt, an order that was founded in 1093 primarily
They
to
fucked
care
up
for the
his
afflicted.
fucking painting, though.
Reportedly, the
hell?
feeling of burning in the extremities would escalate into hallucinations and seizures, and the victim's limbs would soon turn necrotic and fall off into joints. It wasn't until centuries later that
What the fuck are these diseases?
scientists figured out the cause of St. Anthony's Fire. the fungus known as ergot, which frequently infected rye bread. The fungus would produce a compound that interrupts the blood supply to the limbs, leading to the onset of the plague symptoms.
These compounds are very dangerous. They can cause hallucinations, they can cause people to have dry gangrene, lose their fingers, lose their limbs.
The disease affected cows as well as humans, and a small handful of tainted grain was capable of destroying entire communities. In the grand scheme of things, the Catholic Church was still figuring out its whole deal in the Dark Ages. The 7th century, for example, saw the development of the Rule of St. Benedict, which were guidelines for those living in religious communities. And the church was pretty hardcore right from the beginning when it came to people disagreeing on dogma. Any Christians who weren't on board with any elements of the church's teachings were likely to find themselves on the receiving end of a good flogging, or even execution. Before the Dark Ages, there were a variety of different ways in which the Christian faith could be interpreted. The First Council of Nicaea in 325 was called to unify the church, but that didn't stop people from believing what they believed. After the council determined what was right, however, the Catholic Church became relentless in its persecution of so-called heretics. Take the Paulicians, for example, a sect established by Constantine Sylvanus in the 7th century that believed no priest was needed to commune with God. He was stoned to death in 684 while his followers were burned at the stake.
Damn.
Those that survived founded the Bogomils, who later became the target of some of the bloodiest Christian crusades. In this era, the idea that you could decide the particulars
Bro,
of
people just been beefing for like hundreds of years. This is nothing new to 2025, bro. Motherfuckers wanting to nuke people, that's been like part of human history, bro. That's what I'm getting out of this. Everybody just has to do war and then, we calm down.
your faith could easily get you killed. It's difficult to know just how extensive anti-Semitism was.
Now they're gonna drop like 2-3 bombs. It's over. GG. Reborn Earth. 90% of the population gonna be wiped in the first few bombs, bro.
During the Dark and Middle Ages, but many records suggest it wasn't a great time to be Jewish, particularly after the papacy.
It really has been a problem for them, huh?
Gregory used economic policies to strong-arm Europe's Jewish population into converting to Christianity, and after his papacy ended in 604, events took a turn for the worse. That's when the church got together with Europe's monarchies to expel Jewish residents. Others were given the choice between converting to Christianity or becoming a slave, and anything that happened to those who chose slavery was seen as divine justice. Historians have even pinpointed groups of Jews who were specifically targeted by Europe's rulers. For example, beginning in 586, Sisebuto of Spain enacted severe laws against the Jews, and the punishment for breaking those laws was death by stoning or burning. By the time another king took over in 621, that doctrine had escalated. Any Jew found in the region would be punished with 100 blows, then exiled and stripped of their property. No discussion about the dangers of the Dark Ages would be complete without mentioning the Vikings. But here's the thing. There is a huge schism between schools of thought when it comes to figuring out just how bloodthirsty they really were. The Viking Age began with the sacking of the monastery at Lindisfarne on June 8, 793 AD. For the next 300 years, the Vikings would sail and pillage from Newfoundland to France to what's now Ukraine, apparently killing pretty much everyone who got in their way.
Because we are Vikings.
But could these be little more than stories? Well, maybe, or maybe not. Independent journalist Patrick Cockburn has gone as far as suggesting that the Vikings committed atrocities on a scale not unlike those carried out by the SS in Poland during World War II. Others, however, have suggested that the viciousness of the Vikings has been hugely exaggerated.
Israel's a little
Either way,
touchy,
it's
yeah.
certainly true that the Vikings were violent to some degree, and surprisingly...
Israel is like that little kid at the playground that gets bullied by everybody, so when you try to be its friend, it'll just punch you in your throat to test your, test your might.
Enough that violence could sometimes go the other way. On November 13th, 1002, the Anglo-Saxon king Ethelred the Unready ordered everyone in his kingdom to kill any Danish man they could find. By this point, Norse migration to England had been going on for generations, and the country had a significant Scandinavian population. It's uncertain just how many people were slaughtered during the St. Brice's Day massacre, but mass burial sites connected to Ethelred's orders have since been uncovered and excavated. The idea of a pilgrimage was to visit some sacred location in Christendom and ideally get a little closer to God in the process. The practice was widely popular as early as the 4th century, and throughout the Dark and Middle Ages, Europe's faithful were encouraged to undertake the journey to places as far away as Bethlehem and Jerusalem. It's also incredibly dangerous, however, and while the Knights Templar were formed in the 12th century to protect pilgrims on their journeys to the Holy Land, before that, everyone was on their own. Most pilgrimages would take a year or more, and on the way, pilgrims would face obstacles.
If you need to run away from your shawty, if you need a break from your relationship, baby, I'm going on a pilgrimage. I'm finding God, and you just disappear out of our life.
Obstacles such as bandits, shipwrecks, natural disasters, and disease. That last point is particularly significant, as for 2 whole centuries, pilgrims would have been journeying through plague-infested cities and villages. And getting there was just
imagine you run into like
so
the plague.
Trip would be just as perilous. Bloodletting had been around for a long time by the time the Dark Ages rolled around. This practice began in ancient Egypt and spread to ancient Greece, so by the time physicians in the medieval era were doing it, it had a fairly respectable history in the field of medicine. In the Dark Ages, though, people got a little carried away. Bloodletting was used in the treatment of a shockingly wide array of illnesses, from epilepsy and gout to the plague. Special tools were used to puncture arteries.
Bruh. Why? Why? Little Jimmy, you got a sore throat? Oh, you a little sick? Let me do some bloodletting. Crazy work. Crazy work.
And if that sounds incredibly
With their
dangerous,
what?
it's because it is.
No way,
Many historians
how?
now believe that the practice killed more people than it cured. Most of the time, the amount of blood
that's crazy.
was measured by how long it took for a patient to pass out, and that's when they generally stopped. Death happened for a number of reasons, as not only was hemorrhagic shock and death from blood loss a very real possibility, but infections were common too. At a time before antibiotics, a wound becoming infected was more or less a death sentence. Much research has been done on the worst time in history for a European to have been alive, and the mid-6th century is a strong contender for the title. You've got the Justinian Plague, of course, which was really getting into the swing of things at this point in time. There were also a series of volcanic eruptions that began in 536. The first was so huge that it filled the Earth's atmosphere with dust, sulfur, and ash. So much debris that it blacked out the sun for an incredible 18 months. The result was a global drop in temperatures, leading to widespread crop failure and famine. Layer the plague on top of that.
Why is there like one global warming event and all of a sudden it's famine on the fucking scoreboard? Like, what the fuck?
And you've got a scenario best described by the Byzantine historian Procopius, who wrote, "Men were free neither from war nor pestilence, nor any other thing leading to death." Strangely enough, it was believed for a long time that the environmental effects of those eruptions had been exaggerated by contemporaries. It wasn't until the 1990s that data from tree rings confirmed that the stories were absolutely true, and that the world had been plunged into what's now known as the Late Antique Little Ice Age. As Harvard professor Michael McCormick
dying in an ice age would be terrible, bro. I would rather just kill myself. Dying in an ice age is so horrifically bad because you're not going to be comfortable anytime. God damn it.
Sums it up. It was the beginning of one of the worst periods to be alive. Bullets, disease, mining accidents, and tarantula juice? Statistically, you wouldn't have lasted a single day in the Wild West.
Why?
Before anyone could survive in the American West, they had to get there first, and there was a pretty good chance of dying along the way. Britannic estimates that between the 1840s and 1860s, there were between 300,000 and 400,000 people who headed west on the Oregon Trail alone. Of those, the National Park Service says that 1 in 10 died before they reached the Promised Land. There are almost a shocking number of ways people died, with some of the most common causes being gunshot wounds, accidents, weather-related tragedies, drowning.
Hey, chat, let me know. Would y'all go on the Oregon Trail? Would you take that journey across the Americas, bro?
Crossing the trail's multiple rivers and, of course, dysentery.
What's that?
That's where you poop to, Krog.
Uh-oh.
And those are just the big ones. There were plenty of other risks, too. Rattlesnake bites could turn deadly, and at the time, bison were still all over the place. A stampeding herd could quickly and easily overrun a wagon train, and they did. The animals traveling with the convoy were also a major danger. Most traveled with their own herds, which included oxen, horses, and mules. Beyond riding accidents, people were often kicked or killed in stampedes. And perhaps the most tragic of these deaths are those who fell off wagons and were either crushed by the wheels of their own or other settlers' wagons, or were dragged
Damn,
along behind
bruh.
them. When Dr. Jim Kornberg put this...
Damn, bro. They hitting that fucking team damage, bro. They hitting that team damage. You
spotlight
played
on the fastest
Oregon
killer in the
Trail.
Old West for True West magazine, it
Oregon
wasn't an
Trail,
infamous
half of
gunman
us
as you
would be
might
dead.
expect. Rather, it was cholera. A bullet, after all, can only kill a very limited number of people, but cholera is a gift that keeps on giving. In 1873 alone, a major cholera epidemic swept through the West. And at this point in history, the medical community understood exactly how it was spread. The bodily fluids expelled were called cholera poison, and in Dr. John M. Woodward's 1,144-page report to Congress, he concluded that disinfecting everything that could be disinfected was the way to go. Unfortunately, disinfectant was hard to come by in the West, and people kept on dying. And that's just one disease. The National Park Service says that measles, scurvy, dysentery, pneumonia, and smallpox were also common. Smallpox came to the Americas with the Spanish, and once it was there, it and other European diseases killed around 90% of native peoples in North and South America. The disease drove the native populations to horrifying extremes. One incident was recounted by historian David Dari, who found a newspaper account from 1878 of an Apache medicine man who, after diagnosing 2 babies with smallpox, shot and killed them both with a single bullet.
Damn.
Historian David Dari wrote Frontier
Damn.
Medicine, a book that gave a disturbing look
Talk
into
about having a bad day. Damn.
what being a doctor in the Old West meant. Both for the doctors and their patients, it's truly grim stuff. And he found that doctors were largely making things up as they went, frequently prescribing cures that did more damage than the illness or injury.
I had a cold a couple years ago. I went in there. You know what he said to me? He goes, "Oh, you need an ear nail." A nail in my ear.
And tragically, due to cultural bias, white doctors often scoffed at the medicinal knowledge of Native American tribes, a treasure trove of information that could have done some real good. There were essentially 3 options for anyone who was sick or injured: waiting for a doctor, treating their own problems, or just giving up the ghost. If the doctor showed up, he might perform a bloodletting or administer a weird medicine like the 1815 cure for arthritis and gout. That involved killing a dog, filling the body with things like turpentine, brimstone, and nettles, then roasting it over an open fire. And just breathe.
At least I know my boy's trying, you know? At least he's trying. I don't know if that's gonna do shit for me, but at least I know the boy's trying.
Then the fumes, and you're cured, or not. It's no wonder
I'll
then
be
that
mad
many
as
turn
fuck.
to self-medicating for
I'll be
chronic
mad as
conditions.
fuck if that
One of these
motherfucker
people
pulled
is the
out
famous gambler
something
Don
to
Holloway.
boil.
Forrest Tennant MD says that he self-medicated with opium and alcohol when he developed tuberculosis. And while he lived longer than expected, he was also regularly coughing up chunks of his lungs.
Damn.
Watch literally any Hollywood Western, and it'll quickly become clear that bodies were dropping left and right. Nothing was sacred, and no one was safe. But is that accurate? Not really, says Montana State University
Yeah, I
professor
don't think
Terry.
they'll. I don't think they'll be fucking. It's on site, bro. That's probably where it's on site comes from, bro. Old Western, pop, pop, like it's on site. If I see Jimmy tomorrow, it's on site. Fuck throwing hands, pop, 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 bro. They were the good old Chirac back in the day, bro. It's an old Western, bro. That's good Chirac.
Anderson. He told Live Science that despite the popular depiction of the West as a place where everyone settled disputes with bullets, oftentimes things were much more civil, but they weren't exactly peaceful either. The Ohio State University's Criminal Justice Research Center did a deep dive into homicide rates in the Old West and found some surprising stuff. Let's take Dodge City during the boom years. Between 1876 and 1885, residents had a 1 in 61 chance of dying a violent death. Their homicide rate was around 165 per 100,000, and while that doesn't sound like much at all, let's put that into perspective. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say that in 2020, the homicide rate was about 7.8 per 100,000, and even that was a huge jump from previous years. Ohio State puts the chances of being murdered in Dodge City on the higher end, but even the low end of the scale is comparatively high compared to today's numbers. It was reported that Oregon had the lowest homicide rate at about 30 per 100,000.
Imagine, bro, they just go in a gunfight. You're like, oh shit, what the fuck? I just came out for some milk. Oh shit. Pop, pop, pop. Everybody just shooting each other, bro. Crazy. It's a movie. Back in the day, they'd be like, yeah, bro. My life's a movie. Yeah, I went through fucking 4 shootouts this afternoon getting goddamn cheese and a sandwich.
Being murdered was a very real and constant threat. To talk about the likelihood of dying in the Old West, it's absolutely necessary to talk about the people who perished the most. Those were, of course, the Native Americans who had been living on the land for generations. Numbers are hard to come by, but it's estimated North America was home to somewhere between 5 and 15 million people at the end of the 15th century. But by the end of the 19th century, there were less than 238,000 remaining. Just what happened is complicated to sum up, but here are a few of the major reasons so many Native American lives were lost. As mentioned, smallpox was particularly devastating and was responsible for a massive death toll. In addition to rampant diseases, a series of wars, including the Battle of Tippecanoe, the War of 1812, and the Seminole Wars, further decreased numbers, along with outright massacres like the Sand Creek Massacre. Then there were forced relocations like the Trail of Tears, which killed thousands of Native Americans in the 1830s, where natives were forced to leave their ancestral homelands and walk more than 1,000 miles to land that the US government decided they could live on, meaning that tragically, the Native Americans who survived the Old West were the exception and not the norm. It's no secret that some days are only survived by being able to kick back with a good cocktail. But in the Old West, that cocktail at the end of a hard day could mean the end of your life. Most Westerns might show—
fuck, bro? You can't even drink your problems away, bro. What the fuck, bro? You can... you like just enjoying a drink. Bro, it's the last drink you ever had. You just had a shit of a day. You just went through 75 blocks of shootouts. You get to the nearest bar to get a drink, and then the drink is so poisonous it kills you. Bro, I'll be so mad, bro. Holy fuck.
Cowboys and outlaws alike sidling up to the bar and ordering a whiskey from the town saloon. But according to the Tahoe Daily Tribune, in addition to locally brewed beers and plain old whiskey, saloons were much more likely to be serving up drinks like the potentially deadly tarantula juice.
Hey, Marshall, here's...
Drinking it allegedly caused those who consumed it to lash out violently because it contained the deadly and hallucinogenic
If I get that tarantula juice, bruh, yo, I'm shooting up the bar. Before I die, I'm hitting everybody. Bro, somebody gave me tarantula juice, bruh. You gotta let that shit loose. You gotta turn that shit into Swiss cheese. Everybody going down. What the fuck?
A chill-inducing name because those who frequently partook of it often complained of feeling like they were covered in crawling spiders. The CDC says that only small amounts of strychnine are needed to cause strychnine poisoning and death. However, strychnine wasn't the only questionable substance in alcohol in those days. In many saloons, it was all about stretching liquor as far as they could and raising profits, which meant many saloons were cutting their liquor.
Each drink is probably frying your brain, bruh.
And serving customers a potentially deadly mix of booze, gunpowder, turpentine, and even ammonia. So with that said, down the hatch.
Damn it, no!
The dangers of drinking too much are well documented, and in the Old West, it wasn't—
It's like drinking gasoline, bro. You just take one shot of it, it's over.
Just what they were drinking, but how much as well. Starting with the fact that, according to True West magazine, it wasn't an uncommon sight to see a teenager in a saloon drinking with adults. Arizona's official historian Marshall Trimble says that before many hit 16 years of age, they would be classified as severe alcoholic.
What the fuck?
By today's standards. According to historian W.J. Raribaugh, peoples of all ages, including toddlers, were starting the day with a stiff drink and ending with a nightcap, beginning as far back as the 1700s. Alcohol use reached a peak in the 1800s, thanks in large part to massive corn crops and the profitability of turning that into whiskey. Basically, everyone was drinking all the time, and by 1830, intake was astronomical.
Yeah,
let's put it this
fucking
way.
life
If someone
was
today
shit.
was
If you're
to start
going through that
drinking
many shootouts to get home, bro, you're stressed out. You're fucking stressed out.
Someone in the 1830s, and we're certainly not recommending that you do, they'd be drinking 3.5 bottles of whiskey every week. Research from the book Alcohol and Opium in the Old West says that drinking was seen as a perfectly acceptable pastime, so much so
bro,
that
they
abuse and
drinking
addiction
whiskey like motherfuckers drink water. 3 bottles?
would ultimately lead to the temperance movement and prohibition. Starting with the California gold rush of 1849, mining operations started popping up all across the West. As they did, the Independence Hall Association in Philadelphia says that more and more precious metals were found. Eventually, miners weren't just looking for gold, they were also looking for fortunes in silver, copper, lead, and zinc, all of which were key components to the nation's rapidly advancing industries. Montana State University Professor Emeritus of History Pierce Mullen says it quickly became clear just how many ways there were to die in mining, from mine collapses and explosions to falling down ladders that stretched for hundreds of feet. Exhaustion played a huge part in the danger, and so did sanitation. Miners typically lived in closely packed communities that were breeding grounds for disease.
Damn, bro, that motherfucker's gotta be like 5 fucking mining, bruh. Your life is over, dude. You're done with. You got fucking lung cancer to the 11th fucking degree, bruh. You're gonna die by about 17 and 2 months, bro. Fuck, dude. Y'all are miners fucking just inhaling straight smoke and tar.
And they were drinking water contaminated by their not-so-sanitary living conditions, as well as the runoff from the mines. True West magazine says that
motherfucker just build over and mine over? I don't know, bro. I guess all the good shit's on inside of the mine. But damn, bro, you like just getting murked. You dying like the longest death. You smoking cardboard 10 hours a day.
It was only at the beginning of the 20th century that the medical profession started to understand why so many miners were dying of lung-related disorders like tuberculosis. The start of the disease was in silicosis, which came from breathing silica-laden dust. That didn't result in sudden and premature death, and there was a good chance something else, like carbon monoxide poisoning, the loss of a few fingers or limbs, infection, or exposure to mercury and arsenic would. There were plenty of cold nights in the Old West, and countless men headed into the arms of these so-called painted ladies and soiled doves in search of companionship. Unfortunately, this whole industry was set up in such a way that it almost guaranteed a shortened life for both the women and their clients. Christopher Knowlton did a deep dive into the sex work industry on the frontier for his book Cattle Kingdom, The Hidden History of the Cowboy West, and he discovered that once women got into the industry, there was little to no chance of getting out. Most died young of conditions made worse by things like disease, addiction,
now it's
poverty.
Real true gooners only, bro. You got OnlyFans. Every bitch got an OnlyFans, bro. They ain't gotta risk it like back in the day. The OGs laid the rule for them, you know?
According to Medicine in the Old West, some estimates suggest that about 50% of the West's sex workers had some sort of venereal disease, which was spread to the clients. They did take precautions, but it's easy to see how repeatedly using solutions containing chemicals like mercury, carbolic acid, mercuric cyanide, and boric acid might have been more than a little dangerous. It's unclear how many people died of venereal diseases from that time because the cause of death was often listed on death certificates as something other than venereal disease.
I would have
often
to
it was
just
called
end it.
cancer
Oh
of the
my
brain
God,
because of the decay
dude.
that late-stage syphilis caused. All in all, it just wasn't a very fun time to be alive.
Damn, W video. I feel like, bro, we would die so quick. We would die so quick. Oh my God. Okay, let's watch something else. This is Why Nothing Feels Exciting Anymore by Jonny Harris.
How to buy the best maps in 2025. You're doing it wrong. You're still using this to navigate life. Embarrass it.
Yeah, bro, we're all goon brain.
I'm so bored right now, and I truly hate the way it feels. You're probably bored too. You clicked on this video trying to feel less bored, and all you've got is a guy scrolling on his phone alone in a room. Here, let me see if I can
Every
help
day.
with that.
Every day.
Is this better?
Yep.
Good. It's not just you and me. It's everyone.
Bro, this is dopamine crack. Like, when the fucking Chinese government released this, when they put these videos on TikTok that were straight of somebody talking and then one side just playing games, bro, I was hooked. My brain was milked. Bro, this shit was like peak dopamine, bro.
Boredom is on the rise, even at a time when we're in the golden age of content. Boredom isn't simple. It's not trivial, it's not benign. It's actually a painful emotion that quietly haunts our sense of meaning and purpose. It's more like pain or disgust. We've been going deep on this. There's a lot of great new science. My producer Alex read like 5 books on the topic. In all of this literature,
why are you reading 2 books at once? Why you gotta flex on us like that, bro? It's crazy work. Bro, motherfuckers just want to give any aura chance they got. Like, they just want to get it, bro. Like, just that's just farming for it, bro.
My producer Alex.
This is just farming. Like, what are you doing holding 2? I know damn well you keeping up with 1 book, but why do you got 2 books? Why you doing this to me, bro? Just straight aura farming, bro. This is not real.
Topic. In all of this literature, I am starting to see a clear story that explains why all of us are more bored than ever. But I'm also seeing something that I didn't expect, something that's quietly hidden within the feeling of boredom. How this really unpleasant feeling, boredom, might actually be key to living a more purposeful, creative life.
Let me hear about it, brother.
Your life is like a road trip. Stick with me while I build this analogy because it's actually really useful for understanding the real meaning of boredom. It's a road trip in the dark. In this analogy, the most important parts are, first off, your headlights. This is your attention, your ability to pay attention and what you pay attention to. And the second most important part is this fuel tank. We're gonna look at this a lot. This represents your sense of meaning and purpose.
I like this.
It helps motivate you, pushes you along.
This is a good analogy. Hey, Calvin Harris does be having some. Is this how do you say his name? Jonny Harris, not Calvin Harris. My fault, boys.
Your life. Attention and meaning are vital for how humans navigate their lives, how they make decisions on where to go with the constraints of their everyday experience. These determine the route that you take on this road trip. So, you're going along your life, you're taking turns, you're making decisions on how to spend your time. You spend time with friends, you pay attention to this, and look, your tank is filling up with meaning and purpose. For a lot of us, friendship is fuel. You go for a walk, maybe in nature, you listen to music. That is meaningful to you. Maybe you watch a good movie, you shine your attention on that, and that is actually pretty fulfilling. But life is heavy and hard, and sometimes your fuel runs out. Your attention fractures or fades, and then this happens. Lights out. This is boredom, the state where your sense of purpose and meaning is on empty, and consequently you don't really have the ability to muster the energy to pay attention to something that would change the situation. Real quick, before we go on, have you noticed that one way you might cure your boredom is email? Knocking out a few emails makes you feel productive, doesn't take that much work, because it collects and they may do any settle up. 100, that's very rich. Search sites that /60% get added to today's video. The thing that I've learned so do this work with researching this is that boredom is not this trivial, mundane feeling.
Had to get out of it.
It's actually a pretty strong emotional experience, and it kind of sucks.
I define boredom as meaning withdrawal, as a sense of discomfort, telling you that your need for personal meaning is not being met.
Your brain's way of telling you need to change what you're doing because what you're doing is unsatisfying. You find it hard to focus.
And that feeling of like, I can't do anything about this. I don't have any, agency here, or what's the meaning of all of this? You're just kind of stuck there.
What's the
I'd
meaning
say that
of
the
life?
experience of boredom is an experience of unfreedom, an experience of being trapped in the present without meaning.
Time seems to slow.
You're in a situation where I don't care about this. This really doesn't stimulate me in any way.
Tolstoy described boredom as like a desire of desires.
I also remember a friend of mine, he worked with the postal services when we were students, and his job was to take mailbags and turn them inside out to see if there was any letters remaining in there. And one day he told me, yesterday at work, I just started weeping. I mean, this was the myth of Sisyphus, the eternal recurrence of the same. There is no end to it. There would always be another mailbag coming in that would have to be turned inside out. No progression, just the same over and over again. And he started weeping at work. Though being a good Protestant, he continued to turn mailbags inside out while he was weeping.
For me, this happens usually on a Saturday at like 3 p.m. This is when my kids are occupied playing with friends or playing Nintendo or whatever. I have time. I usually don't have time. But Saturday at 3 p.m., I have precious free time that I don't get during the week. and I have all this stuff that I want to do. But then this emotion hits me. This feeling that I don't really want to do anything. Like I can't really muster the motivation to do any of it. And suddenly things get really dark for me. I start to question everything. I start to question my life choices. I'm angry at myself for not doing things that I know some part of me wants to do. I'm wondering if I've made the right life choices. So I know this feeling well, but before reporting this story, I never called it boredom. I kind of thought it was like some flash of depression or restlessness, or maybe it was my ADD or something. Boredom always just felt like this thing that like there's nothing to do and so I'm bored, but that's actually not what's happening here.
Many would call it an emotional state that has cognitive and physiological correlates.
Boredom is the feeling of thinking. It's an affective response to underutilization of our capacities, of our cognitive skills, right? So when you're bored, you're having that affective reaction to the fact that you're not using your brain as well as you could be.
So yeah, boredom is an emotion and it's very uncomfortable. But luckily, I've got a very quick little medicine that is in my pocket at all times. It's not in my pocket right now. Uh-oh, where's my little medicine? It's a small computer device that was probably made in China or India, and it's got software on it that numbs my boredom. Some people call it a phone, but a phone is a thing that was invented like 100 years ago where people...
The iPhone is like the best way to cure any boredom.
Oh, here she is. She was here the whole time. Ah, my precious.
Now with the latest nuclear missile test conducted just
About 3 years ago, I was cooking rice in my kitchen. We tested different questions.
And some people would say, well, that's
Establishes. Oh, man, I love TikTok and all short form video that I consume to cure my boredom. And to be clear, this video will critique all of this and tell us about how the brain is.
His necklace makes me feel a little weird, bro. His necklace feels like a choker. Is he wearing a choker, bro? Why you got a choker on?
Messed up with some of the stuff, but boy, it's fun while it lasts. Anyway,
looks like he's got
this
a
device
choker
is
on.
Very useful for curing my
and
boredom.
this angle on top of him is just crazy. Pause.
And I use it Saturdays at 3 p.m. when I'm feeling bored. And yes, later I will show you the studies that unpack boredom and phone use. But for now, I was actually curious if other people experience this the way I do, because it's a deeply personal and emotional experience. And so I asked my team.
So I usually get bored when I get home from work and I've done all of the things that I wanted to do, like eat dinner, hang out with friends, go to the gym, do a hobby.
Boredom is when you have no personality outside of work.
I get this really uncomfortable feeling, which is boredom. That's this like existential gut punch. And I think about, what am I doing with my life? And I want to crawl out of my own skin. Typically I will numb it with TikTok or playing video games. But sometimes I will sit in it, sit in the discomfort and think about my life. But that is a lot more work and exhausting.
Ironically though, I have noticed that I find my phone to be a sort of boring replacement for the boredom. There's this sort of instant gratification with social media that feels like it's
anytime
the addictive version
you're on
of
TikTok,
boredom.
it's like scratching your little,
it's kind of scary,
like itch for boredom, for sure.
Okay, before we get back to the car analogy, which is very good and very useful, I promise, I want to explain what I've learned about why. Why does boredom even exist inside of our brains? And it turns out that it's actually a very natural biological signal that we developed a long time ago. What's happening when we're bored is a bunch of brain regions are coming together to tell us that we need to do something different with our situation. One of the defining traits of human beings is that we are restless. We need purpose and meaning to fuel our actions. And this has been one way that humans have been pushed to create and change their natural situation, not just for more resources like all animals do, but also in search of meaning. We're these self-aware apes who are able to tell stories of meaning and purpose to each other. And we ourselves are kind of characters in our own story. It's a major reason why humans have been able to cooperate in large numbers with each other, looking towards stories like corporations or religions or countries. All of these are meaningful stories that bind us together to cooperate and change our situation. So a lot of experts now think that boredom is this emotional cue that is pushing us to do something different with our lives, to deliver on that need for meaning. But boredom today is pretty different. In fact, in the old days, most people didn't have time to get bored.
It's typical for traditional societies that you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about what to care about because it's already defined for you.
Let's do one of my favorite things and rewind and see what my little road trip analogy would have looked like if I lived 500 years ago. So I'm a farmer. Most of us would have been farmers, FYI. And I spend most of my time working on the farm because if I don't, my family and I will die. So my attention is locked in to kind of one high stakes activity that defines my life. Let's look down at my
price
meaning
of freedom. The price of freedom.
Purpose fuel tank. Oh, whoa. It's doing great.
Boredom is the price of freedom, bro.
And look, you can see why. Here on the farm, my sense of purpose and meaning flows in abundance from my family, my belonging to a community in which I was born that has well-defined culture and rituals that my ancestors have been doing for thousands of years, and perhaps most of all, I have a clear existential story in the form of religion. This makes death and suffering not so bad, and it fills me with a bigger purpose. This stuff is like rocket fuel for our sense of meaning and belonging and purpose. Now, it doesn't mean life was easy, not at all, but it does mean that we didn't get bored. We didn't have time to get bored, and we didn't have any lack of meaning and purpose. It was all kind of automated for us by our culture.
I think that the experience of boredom was certainly there in traditional or pre-modern societies, but it really gains traction in modernity.
The word has maybe not been around as long as we might imagine, but that doesn't mean that the concept and the experience and the feeling isn't ancient.
Boredom was more of a privilege for those who were at the royal courts, the clergy, and so on.
Rich aristocrats were the rare human beings that had time on their hands. The other group were monks who had quite a bit of time before the rest of us. And in fact, they had a word to describe this feeling of boredom, called it akadia, a lack of motivation to fulfill your purpose, or in this case, your duties to God. Christians would frame this early concept of boredom as a dangerous sin that could kill your faith. They would nickname it the noonday demon, the most dangerous of all the demons because from boredom stemmed many other sinful behaviors.
Yeah.
And they were kind of onto something,
I've heard
as
of
we will
this.
see in the scientific literature.
Your grandma tells you, empty mind is the mind of the devil, Boredom is the devil.
Very soon. French monks updated the interpretation to a desire to escape the present, a tiredness, and a hunger for variety. But then you get to like the 1600s and things start to change, at least in Europe, as people move to cities. They're working in factories, they're doing repetitive work, they have less and less freedom and autonomy and purpose, and they're getting bored.
The words for boredom in different languages, for the most part, they pop up in the 17th century, around there in most languages.
You can see this in like the people who've tracked all the etymology and these words that have been used in different languages.
Etymology.
Here's the usage in Spanish over time. Here it is in French, German, and here it is in English. People start to use the verb bore as a verb in letters and literature in the late 1700s, back when London looked like this.
Needed words to describe an emotion that had become quite a lot more common in modernity. Boredom became available for everybody. It became democratized.
Okay, the history part's over. Now let's look at this part of the graph, this rise. Boredom is surging, and kind of weird because it's surging at a time when we have like more amazing, exciting experiences and content to watch than ever before. That is the mystery at the heart of
That's
this
true,
video.
bro. You ever had like that itch to just keep watching TikToks because any of the last TikToks hasn't scratched the itch? It's like a fucking drug addiction when you're on TikTok, bro. It gives you that first dose of heroin, but then after that, you just gotta keep getting more. Ready it up, brother.
And one I promise I will answer before we are done. Okay, well, one thing is for certain. My life does not look like this anymore. We're not on the farm anymore, filled with meaning from our culture and religion. First off, our map is kind of full of way more possibilities. We're not just going in one predetermined path. I have a million possible routes. And look at my purpose fuel tank down here. I've lost some very important sources of meaning. I don't have religion anymore.
It's like the possibilities are so endless nowadays, bro. It's hard to make a decision. It's like, you go to McDonald's, if they had like 72 options, bro, it'd just be too hard to pick. So you have like the first 3 that you see, you just go with those. Because, bro, like, if you have too many options, it's hard to just, like, pick one because you don't want to pick the wrong one, you know?
Which is a huge hit to my sense of purpose and higher meaning. I'm a
TikTok's
transplant in a big city, in a highly individualistic country.
Bro, they got the algorithm by the ball, bro. It's the biggest psyop in the world, bro. They got you by the fucking balls. They'll give you exactly what you want to watch. You want to watch drug talk where, you know, they're taking you through all kinds of just fucking crazy drugs in the world. You want to watch fucking criminal talk. If you want to watch fucking hippy dippy talk, if you want to watch like some political talk, you know, I've curated my algorithm now to just like big booty Latinas, but you can have any kind of TikTok you want, because bro, the algorithm is the psyop.
So I don't have anywhere near the sense of community and old culture that my ancestors had. This may be different for you if you live in a small town in Europe or Vietnam and you are continuing traditions that your ancestors did. My ancestors left their traditions and came to a new world to start new. So
yes.
Yeah, I lost that part. Now, I do have family. That is,
I do feel that when I went to London, bro, I did feel like a lot of people got traditions. They're like, oh, we do this because we just do it like this. We've been doing it like this for 100 years. Like some of the bars, they've never changed for over 50, 60 years. So I'm like, dude, there is something to tradition vibes, you know, it gives you a sense of belonging.
A massive source of very deep meaning for me. But if I want to fill my tank with meaning, I gotta kind of do it on my own. I have to create my own sense of purpose and meaning, which, to be clear, is a really great thing. Like, I get to determine how I live my life, how I raise my kids, what I do religiously or not religiously, community, and what people I invite into my community. That sense of freedom is wonderful. My point here is that a lot of us don't have our sense of meaning and purpose sort of automated for us like our ancestors did. And that is a major reason why we get bored. Oh, and not to mention that our meaning tanks are now much larger and our expectations kind of full all of the time.
We expect, or could perhaps even say demand, that life should be filled to the brim with meaning at all occasions. We have very little tolerance for these gaps of emptiness in our existence in which nothing really happens. We're having trouble dealing with those.
Pair that with the fact that there's been an assault on my attention abilities thanks to all these flashing buttons and viral videos, and you can see why sometimes this happens.
Flashbang.
The car goes dark. It's 3 p.m. on a Saturday, and I'm stuck. I don't have the attention and the purpose to go anywhere. I'm bored, and it feels pretty horrible. Okay, this is the most important part of the video, I would say, because I just spent all this time giving you the history, building this car analogy, but the car analogy really starts to like pay off from here forward. And this is the part of the video where we see how boredom can be good, how this can actually be a
necklace has got to
thing.
go. I know, bro. It's a little, it's a little bit of a choker. It's a little weird. I don't know. He's got a weird necklace. I am not lying to you, chat. It's just like a weird necklace, bro. It just looks like a choker, bro.
Most important thing for helping you live a more meaningful life. So let me show you. Okay, so I'm bored. I'm stuck without meaning and the ability to pay attention to anything. And for those who need a quick 45-second grounding in the actual neuroscience so that you don't think I'm just winging it with this analogy, here it goes. When scientists put people in a room and make them watch a boring video like this one of two guys hanging laundry, the participants' brains look like this. I should have printed it in color, but probably seen it in color on your video. Lucky you. Boredom. That's what your brain looks like when you're bored. It activates all of these regions that are associated with daydreaming, mind wandering, and thinking about the past and future. Nostalgia. Something I'm very into, actually. Look at this. This is a brain
nostalgia hurts.
that is in big picture mind wandering mode. Default mode network is technically what it's called. But if you go deeper into the center of the brain, you will see that the part of the brain that drives me to pay attention, to make decisions, is anti-correlated. It's kind of turned off. It's not in sync. So I'm feeling all nostalgic about my life story and the meaning behind everything, but it's paired with this inability to channel my attention to make decisions that are meaningful to me. Learning all of this was actually very helpful for me to understand why my 3 p.m. Saturday boredom is so existential feeling. It actually feels really terrible. I start to question everything. I'm thinking about my past, my future. I now understand why. Now, there's way more science and study on this. I'm gonna leave all the sources in the sources doc that is in the description. But just know that my car analogy is grounded in all of this. Let's get back to the car. So we're here in the dark car, we're bored, we're out of gas. Now let's look what people do when they're in this state. You can do a few things. Number one is you can become really mean. On the relation of boredom and sadistic aggression. It's a great paper. So one cure for boredom is sadism, defined here as harming others for pleasure. For some reason, the moment you decide to do
real
harm,
freaky, huh?
look what happens to your car. It revs back up. And weirdly, our purpose tank gets really full. Our attention fires up. Our car is running again. We turn down this sketchy road where we snap at our partner or yell at our kids with the intent to hurt them. We get online and we start stirring people up. We make them angry with bad faith critiques, trying to inflame them, trying to hurt them. This is one that I'm familiar with. Not doing it, but receiving it.
That's like half of the internet trolls right here.
Fuel tank. It is full to the brim. So the monks were right. There is a noonday demon within boredom. The way this looks in the studies is that they put people at a table with worms and a coffee grinder. Bored people are more likely to take these worms and grind them up in the coffee grinder for no other reason other than to cure their boredom. And they even gave these worms names to humanize them so that it would kind of seem even more cruel. Names like Toto, Tifi, Kiki. Oh, and if you're concerned about the worms, the coffee grinders were fake. The worms didn't actually die, but the participants didn't know that. In other studies, bored people are more likely to take away money from random people that they don't even know. Not because they gained anything, just because they were bored, and being mean helped take the edge off. Now these studies do have some caveats, like some people
literally motherfuckers just be doing shit for the plot, bro. That's why drama sells.
Propensity to be bored, or some people have a higher propensity to be sadistic. But even controlling for that, when you and I, all of us, the general person is bored, we are more likely to engage in sadistic behavior, to harm others for pleasure. I mean, this is kind of well known. You see headlines every once in a while of destructive, terrible things that have happened because, quote, someone was bored. A search for meaning and a lack of mobility to create that meaning leads people to turn to destruction. Sometimes self-destruction. There's one study where people will sit around and instead of just sit and be bored, they will zap themselves, hurt themselves.
What the fuck?
Even when the only option is
we got
motherfuckers
that are freaks.
That's potentially harmful to you, you'll go ahead and do it anyway. As a
they be trying to give freaky.
This can manifest in other kinds of self-harm for people who are bored, who are looking for a physical sensation to help distract them from the very uncomfortable mental pain that comes with boredom. It has the function to avoid or escape from aversive emotional experiences. Okay, but this is the dark side of boredom. You have another choice. Here's the hopeful side of boredom. Rewind the clock, get me back to being bored in that dark car before the trolling and being mean to my kids and partner began. Here we go. We're stuck here. Instead of revving your car up with that demonic fuel that we just saw, you can do the much harder thing. You can get out of the car and push it. You can push it down a road that you know contains some meaningful
getting them gym workouts
Here I am pushing mine towards going on a walk in nature. It's actually a lot of effort. I do not want to do this by definition because I am bored. I am manually pushing it. But as I push, my mind is kind of in this big picture place. Remember the default mode network? I'm thinking about the past and the future, about the meaning of my life. I'm feeling things and reading my thoughts in a way that I usually don't get to. And look what happens when I get close. This worked. My car fires back up, and yes, it took some effort, but my purpose.
Everybody should go on a good, peaceful, long walk to find themselves. That's a good walk around a body of water. You really find yourself for real. You gotta do it once a month, maybe once in a long while. We're going an hour long walk, bro. I did it a lot in California. It was fun, bro, just walking. It was a good, fun walk, bro. It just sometimes lets your, pilgrimage genes get, affected. It gets your pilgrimage genes calmed down,
Really not. My attention and my ability to keep it is flickering back on. I'm going back to things that bring me purpose without having to harm anyone. And in fact, the benefit of all of this is I'm now more in touch with my sense of meaning and purpose because I've had to sit with it. I've had to struggle through not feeling it and contemplate what meaning is for me. What do I actually want to do with my life? So I get back in the car and I'm rethinking my route on this map, what turns I want to take. And to stretch this analogy even further, I'm stronger. I'm stronger because I got out and pushed my car. So like my muscles are stronger. Next time I get bored, I have the mental muscles to push through. And this is why
that's why you start gooning twice a day, 7 days a week. My muscles for boredom will be stronger next week. But right now, I have to goon.
Some studies, not all, demonstrate a statistically significant correlation between boredom and creativity. Being bored makes you more creative.
All day in the woods shit. So
which gets to answering another question I've had for a long time,
being,
which is
like going camping nowadays is so much more fun. Going fishing, like just being out in nature, you know, being a real hippie, letting your feet touch the grass, you know, touch some grass, you know.
Why some cultures have entire concepts that embrace this idea of boredom. Il dolce far niente is an Italian phrase that translates into the sweetness of doing nothing. The Dutch have this word niksen, I think that's how you say it, which is like the verb to nothing. The practice of intentionally embracing a state of boredom and seeing the benefits from it. There's an entire religion or spiritual tradition, I guess, Taoism, that is dedicated to embracing non-action in the name of realigning your actions in harmony with your values. And remember, our biology gave us boredom for a reason. It is a very important part of being humans who are driven by meaning and who are always looking for ways to chase after what is meaningful to them.
Living with it, dealing with it, actually creates a space in which you can actually have an encounter with yourself. You can actually be in your own company and not just the company of everybody else.
Okay, but I always get annoyed when people conclude that like the answer is to embrace the discomfort and just embrace it, and that's as simple as it can be. I'm not going to do that because in this case, I think there are actual tips that I think are helping me as I practice them, and that could help you too. And it is not become more enlightened and embrace Taoism. That might work for you, but for the rest of us, we are putting together a guide of tips on how to manage boredom, and I will get to that in a sec. But first, I want to show you the last really important part of this. The answer to why we've got this graph. Boredom is on the rise, not just here, but kind of in lots of different countries. It's sort of a paradox because we're at a time of life where there's more exciting content and experiences and freedom and opportunity than ever before. Why is this happening? Well, we've already answered part one of that, which is we have less inherent meaning in our lives because we've moved away from some of these collective sources of meaning like religion, community, ritual, etc. But the other part is something you're also probably very familiar with. Let me show you. Okay, let's get back to the bored, dark car, clear out all this wholesome meaning stuff. Let's get back to one more scenario of what we can do when I'm sitting here questioning my existence. I've got this other option, and damn, it's a good option.
I do that quite often. Questioning my existence, that's a daily activity. That's like journaling, you know?
Oh, and before you think I'm going to get all judgy and start condemning you for using your phone or watching Netflix, I'm not. That would be dumb. I'm not going to do that. This is our lives. I'm literally a person who makes content for the internet. I'm addicted to social media and TV just like you are. That's fine. I'm not a zealot and I'm not going to judge anyone. But now that I've read all the literature, I do want to let you in on what happens when the phone and the scrolling turns into our medicine for boredom. Okay, the car's back on, we're moving. Let's look at the meaning tank here. Okay, so it's Saturday, 3 p.m. I'm bored, but look, my car's back on. Scrolling some YouTube shorts here, and
it's like driving an electric. If you use your phone, it's like driving an electric in this whole scenario.
The tank isn't full, but there's enough for the car to go. But wait, something's off here. Oh, look, my attention headlights aren't even working. They're not pointed at the road. I can't really tell where I'm going. Ah, I see why. All my attention power is being used to power my phone. This is what I am paying attention to. So my car is driving, I'm moving, but I'm sort of just driving in a straight line. There's kind of a sense of meaning and entertainment, but I get the sense that I'm not totally choosing this as I scroll.
The ungodly algorithm of TikTok.
Oh yes, look over here. I've pressed cruise control, autopilot. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not an internet troll. I'm not in that demonic mode. I'm not on some sketchy street somewhere. But I'm also not using boredom to do the hard work of reassessing my route. I'm just going straight.
Yeah, when I'm just like annoying people, I'm gonna just call it demon time.
Which again is fine. Like after a week of work, I'm not interested in like reassessing my life. I want to decompress. I want to hit cruise control, and I want to sit back and I want to passively be given a sense of meaning about the story that I'm watching on Netflix or the Instagram, whatever. That is a way that we decompress. Stories. People have been doing it forever. I know I've said this, but the last thing we need is more judgy energy around this stuff. But what happens if phones and scrolling become the medicine I use every time I'm bored? Well, there are good studies around this now. First, what they're finding, unsurprisingly, is that people are more and more using their phones to cure the feeling of boredom. I mean, yeah, that makes total sense. You're bored waiting for a train or whatever, you pull out your phone. What this means is that you never get out to push your car. You never sit in the default mode network and push your car and assess your life.
It's hard.
And do the uncomfortable thing.
It's hard.
Thinking big about
sitting
the future
there
and
quietly
this cruise
in the
control
awkward
is kind of like a nice
silence.
morphine drip into our purpose tank. We don't ever need to get out and push the car and do the big mind-wandering thing that leads us sometimes to more creative or meaningful actions. And according to this one study, what they're finding is that evidence shows that digital media, rather than reducing our boredom or like satiating it, it actually increases it. So to push our analogy to its absolute limits, not only does the phone never give us a chance to break down and reassess our route, but it actually makes us more likely to break down. It's as if the fuel that we get from this is like this radioactive goo that creates a leak in our fuel tank. So it runs out quicker and we break down more often. We get bored more often, which in turn leads us to grab our phone to satiate or get rid of our boredom. Psychologists call this a vicious cycle between boredom and phones. Now look, I knew phones were addictive. I've read all this stuff, the dopamine, all that. We all know this is happening. But I didn't know this when I got into this story. I didn't realize this natural psychological cue called boredom that has a lot to do with my mind's ability to make meaning and purpose is being totally messed with because of my propensity to grab the phone to like cure it, which makes me more likely to get bored, which makes me more likely to grab my phone. Like I didn't realize that existed,
bro.
and it's actually blowing my mind.
It's like a crack cycle.
To recap, you get bored, you have three options. Go down the demonic route, start to hurt people and be mean. Go down the constructive route, do the hard work of sitting with it, let your mind drift into broad, creative, nostalgic thinking, even though it's uncomfortable. Or take the middle road, turn on cruise control, and take neither route. Kind of numb the whole system. The last question I want to try to answer, or start to answer, is, okay, so what do we do?
Opium.
This exists. Phones aren't going away. I'm not getting rid of my phone anytime soon. How do I manage boredom in a modern world? That's the last section of this video.
The ultimate
So if you clicked on this video because you wanted to learn about the history and neuroscience of boredom, and you yourself have no interest in figuring out how to manage your own boredom, then now is the time for you to click away and go find something else to do. The rest of us, I want to take the rest of this video to go through some really specific tips that I've been practicing and exploring, and that the research points to as ways that we can manage our boredom. It'll all be documented in the link in the description, so you don't even have to watch this. You can just click that and read through it briefly. But for those who want, let me talk you through it. Number one, look at it. I'm not going to go all new age on you, but I am going to say that the most effective, most powerful, subtle thing that you can do is recognize what it feels like to be bored the next time you're bored. Try to notice your mind going into a more existential mode where you're thinking about the past and the future. At first, it's just going to feel like a jumble and a cloud of uncomfortable feeling. But with time, even if you just take a minute before you intervene and do anything, just to notice, you will refine that sense of being able to see the boredom. Oh, and you kind of have to do this without judging it, like without like getting down on yourself. Just like let it happen, look at it. There's actually a ton of science around this very simple technique that is called mindfulness. It applies to all kinds of mental experiences, but it really applies to this boredom situation. There's a million ways to formally practice this, like a million apps, Headspace, the Waking Up app with Sam Harris, a million YouTube videos, whatever. But you can also just informally try it out next time you're having an uncomfortable feeling. Try to look at it instead of avoid it. Number two, and this is also going to sound kind of new agey, but I promise it's also very useful, is work on accepting it, meaning going through the process of, instead of trying to avoid it, embracing it and saying, this is what is happening right now. And even saying, this is what helps for me, is like, this is actually a good thing. This is my body telling me something about my life. I'm going to actually try to accept it instead of trying to resist it.
The $64,000 question about boredom that everybody wants to know.
Why do they got a specific number on that?
How do I eliminate it? And there are lots of different responses to that. I think the first one is to say you can't eliminate it. Boredom, if it's something that plays a role in your life, if it's functional, then you don't want to get rid of it, right? Because you want that function.
Another way to put this is relax into it. Relaxation is kind of the opposite of boredom in some ways. Relaxation is an acceptance
waking
of
up
non-action.
is decent. The waking up app is decent.
I've never
used
brain
it.
scans and I think of like
what
the
do you do with
nostalgic,
it?
like thinking about the past and the future, and try to say like, oh, my brain is going through this like default mode network thing, and that's kind of cool. I'm gonna just relax into it instead of like judge myself that I'm like feeling it. Okay, so those are the first kind of micro actions that you can take inside of your mind next time you feel bored. And those sort of set the stage for managing your boredom. If you do those two, then you will be in a better place to engage with the rest of the things on this list, which are things that are scientifically proven to help you fill this tank of meaning, which is core to us feeling regulated and good. So that leads us to engage in what the scientists call pro-social behavior, which means just hanging out with people. So much of human meaning comes from
friends.
Relationships, connection with others. Helping other people happens to be like a very potent fuel for this sense of meaning and purpose. And for the introverts out there, it doesn't have to be like a heart-to-heart, hour-long conversation with somebody. It can be like going to an event where there's a bunch of other people. Group rituals, festivals, sporting events, concerts,
yes, like joining
political
the
rallies.
clan.
These are a fast track to feeling some kind of collective meaning.
That's why they
with
did it
your
back in
fellow
the
human
day.
beings. I think other animals like
They didn't
dogs
want to be
and
bored.
cats and pets also can fulfill a version of this as
I
well.
want a
We're
cat
gonna put some
again,
links
bro.
in this
I
Boredom
low-key
guide
kind of miss my
of
cat.
A platform where you can find different communities and meetups, as well as this cool blog post of 99 ways to find IRL community. Okay, the next one. Get creative. Humans are artistic,
Meditation
creative
app, I
beings.
see.
And turns out that being creative, making stuff, fills our tank. And as the science says,
Might have to
when
get
we
into
are
building
bored,
cars
we are
again,
actually
chat.
uniquely
Hey.
placed to be more
That
creative,
might be
to
the
think
move.
differently than we normally do. The literature talks a lot about like mastery and practice, like practicing piano every day. That's a little high effort for this. I'm more so thinking low effort, low cost, like high reward creativity. Cook something. Do some like basic crocheting or knitting, origami, adult coloring books, mood boards, collages, finger painting. Like, it doesn't have to be good. No one has to see it. But the act of making something is
I
a
told
source of
y'all, bro,
meaning and a
creating
great way
art
to, like,
and being
leverage your
creative is
boredom
like
for
a
something
very
creative.
key
The
part
next
of
one
my
is near and dear to
life,
my
bro.
heart, which is get curious. Curiosity and enthusiasm.
Yes, I
about
need to learn how to
something
swim
is a
and
deep
go
source of meaning for a lot of
surfboard
people. This is actually
on
like
my
the
surfboard.
core. For me, besides my family, this is like where I get most of my meaning in life. Nerding out about stuff. There's this quote from Andy Warhol. You need to let the little things that would ordinarily bore you suddenly thrill you.
Thrill you.
Easier said than done, Andy.
Wow.
But like, try to find things that light you up. Whether
Thrill
it's like
you.
obsessing over the specs of trains
Cats
in
are
Europe,
the best.
or looking into how ants build ant colonies. Whatever. Finding something that you can nerd out about and obsess over can be really good for meaning and a cure for boredom. Going down the old Wikipedia rabbit hole.
Why is he
Works every-
eating chips with a fucking...
And a cure for boredom. Going down the old Wikipedia rabbit hole.
What is going on here? Okay, now when I say people just be trying to flex too hard, bruh, he's just doing too much, bro. Just doing too much. Just eat your fucking chips with your hands. Why do you need chopsticks to eat? You just doing too much, bruh. You just trying to fucking aura farm, bro. I don't like this. He's clip farming me.
Works every time. If you cultivate this enough, you get access to like the inverse of boredom, which is called flow, where you are so deeply engrossed in what you are learning or doing that you kind of forget everything. It's like your attention and meaning are just on like turbo drive, and you can kind of just go for hours. Okay, next one is going outside. This is again well documented in the literature. Wandering through a forest does wonders to our sense of awe and perspective and meaning. You're also moving your body. and going through a walk in nature. And often you can find activities that blend a bunch of these. Like if you go out bird watching or something with somebody else, you are doing the social thing, you are doing the nerd out about something thing, and you're doing like the go on a walk in nature thing. Go to a painting class. You're doing mastery and practice, but you're also doing creativity. You're also doing social. So anyway, all of this is in the guide, in the description. And I also want to kind of hear from all of you, like, what does boredom feel like for you? And what do you do when you are bored? I would love the comment section to turn into a discourse around the experience of boredom for different people. So please do that. So I just want to finish by re-emphasizing what we started with, which is that boredom is not bad. It is a very natural cue that our body has given us to spur us to action, to let us think about what is meaningful in our lives, and to help us assess our story through life. And in this world where meaning is not made for us like the old days, and we have these phones that kind of sabotage our ability to sit with ourselves, learning to sit with and accept boredom is a skill. It is one that you must practice if you want to leverage its benefits. So I know that this story has been quite impactful for me in how I approach my bored moments, and I hope it can do some version of the same for you. And I really look forward to hearing from all of you down in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
W video, Mr. Jonny Harris. Look. That was a very, very informational video. We watched quite a bit of things about that, how great our life is, that we just need to just stop complaining. If we just simply stop complaining, we might enjoy our life a lot better. Because right now, I think complaining is our biggest enemy. And, comparison is a thief of joy, as they say. So in today's society, everybody's on Instagram, looking at how somebody else is doing better than you and just really living their best life. It kind of affects us, At least it does me. I do get quite salty when I see somebody driving a Rari and I'm stuck in a Camry that's, having braking problems, But sometimes you just have to think about that. At least you're not going through a fucking famine. You're not going through a fucking massacre. There isn't a tornado that just squad wiped your whole city. But I guess, like we were watching, sometimes freedom comes with that price tag. It just sometimes has to be enjoyed. Is a sound car? Yeah, Camry's a great car. It does work pretty well, but you gotta take care of it once in a while. And I've been, neglecting it a little bit. Camry's a great car. I'm not complaining that it's not a great car. But God has to put on some fucking miles on that hoe. I got nearly 200,000 miles on that hoe. I need a new car. But look, chat, I hope y'all enjoyed today's fucking stream. I hope you really liked it. The camera view is different. The energy is different. I hope you hit the follow button and the notifications, because you know how the boy is coming. Give it a fucking like. Give it a follow. And until next time, stay fucking blessed, boy.